Welcome to Polaris-Live. Thank you for joining us today for today's discussion in the series focused on the U.S.-China relationship and its global implications as seen through experts around the world. This program is brought to you live by the Foreign Policy in conjunction with the This program is brought to you live in conjunction with the Foreign Policy Association of New York. If you have questions for today's guest, please feel free to submit them using the bar on the right side of the screen. After the live event, you can also listen to these programs on your favorite podcast program. And if you're a subscriber, a one-page specially curated summary of the program will be sent directly to your inbox. Let me take a moment to remind viewers that Polaris Live is commercial-free and entirely viewer-supported. Please support us by making a nominal contribution, becoming a subscriber. The subscription will get you a one-page, professionally curated executive summary of each program delivered directly to your mailbox, and invitation to a special one-hour Polaris Live roundtable program. A subscription QR code will be seen at the end of this conversation. Thank you again for being part of this conversation. The United States and Israel are now at war with Iran, raising the specter of a widening regional conflict that could stretch from the Persian Gulf to the Red Sea, with Houthi attacks threatening the Bab al-Mandeb, second of two energy choke points in global trade routes. The stakes are no longer regional, they are global. How does Beijing see this moment? As a contained crisis or a turning point in the world? Joining us today is Dr. ZHA Daojiong, one of China's leading scholars, who offered a rare early look into how China is interpreting this war and what it may do next. This is Polaris Live, United States and China in the world. Dr. ZHA Daojiong is Professor of International Political Economy in the School of International Studies and Institute of South-South Cooperation and Development, Peking University. He comes here live from Beijing, China. His areas of expertise include traditional security relations, international political economy, China's international economic relations. His research publications cover such topics as energy, water management development, public aid. He contributes opinion pieces in newspapers, including the South China Morning Post. Before joining the faculty of Peking University, he taught in the University of Macau, International University of Japan, Miyazaki International College, and Renmin University of China. Welcome to Polaris Live, Dr. ZHA. It's a pleasure to see you again.
Yeah, glad to see you again, too.
We're now in the fifth week of the American-Israeli war against Iran, Dr. ZHA. Does Beijing see this war as an isolated regional conflict or a first step to a changing global order?
Well, there are various interpretations. What is often portrayed as a Chinese view sometimes is actually a mixture of translation of views, especially in English language, and then coupled with a commentary. Why is that important to observe? Actually, only in recent years have we, in this country, launched what's called country and area studies. It's the program that's promoted by the Ministry of Education was started about 5 or 8 years ago, and these things are very interdisciplinary. But prior to that, for many decades, Chinese universities and research institutes look at Iran, look at the Middle East, mainly through cultural perspective. the study of archives, study of religious documents, not necessarily religious, cultural documents, translation of novels. And so what I'm really trying to say is that we are, as a collectivity of scholars, I do think it's fair to say we're still going through a learning process about what's going on in that part of the world.
Well, given your interpretation, also the fact that some 45% of China's oil flows through the Strait of Hormuz, two nuclear powers are involved in the war, why hasn't China played a larger, more active role after really all your country has long-standing ties to Iran?
Well, partly because I'm hearing a bit of an echo in your voice. Did I hear you say 45% of China's oil import comes from the Middle East?
Exactly right.
There are different numbers. But nevertheless, well, if you look at crude oil, if you look at refined oil or fertilizers and other oil products, or you look at LNG, natural gas, so 45% is an international estimate, but then in terms of vulnerability, it will be very useful to break this down to, for example, the nature of the contract. For LNG import, Qatar is a large supplier of LNG to China.
Right.
And we have a 27-year long-term agreement. And more importantly, according to the contract, that LNG is shipped to China on Qatari national fleets. And then the same is true with Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, to a lesser extent Yemen, Oman. I'm sorry, not Yemen, Oman. About the only country where we source energy where it's or China in terms of the production, in terms of handling the trade and the shipping, is Iraq, partly due to the continuing struggle in that country to reconstruct an integrated oil industry. So the vulnerability, yes, structurally, if you look at numbers, but then if you look at the energy industry, including the upstream, the transport, we're not that vulnerable, especially when you have contracting arrangements that are in effect delivery at a place, meaning the material, the shipping, the insurance, the costs, as well as the risks those costs are borne by the exporter before their products arrive here at Chinese ports, and then we pay for that.
But I'm interrupting you. The point is that China has deep stake now in the Middle East. The BRI has a lot of projects running in the Middle East, right? So it's becoming a financial center. And why hasn't China become more active in trying to find some kind of solution?
Actually, the BRI is meant to be, and it's practiced as a joint project. The outside China, there is an understanding of the BRI as being an offer to take on responsibilities that more by the China itself. That's not true. We call these three joint efforts in three areas. One is a joint conceptualization, and second is joint implementation, and third is sharing, which is a translation from Chinese, of the benefits of the projects. So in that regard, the extent of the progress of the BRI is, in spite of all those roadmaps, those visions announced, is fluid. So we don't have a fixed agenda, although the overall direction is there. Now, why does China does not get that well involved? If you relate to what I said earlier on, yeah, you can be involved, but you better know what's going on the ground. But across the board, we don't know as much. China is a rather recent actor in the region in terms of business, in terms of investment, and cultural exchange as well, including scholarship. So how do you intervene? And we don't have if you look at the history of comprehensive economic, military, cultural, diplomatic engagements, Japan, and even South Korea, they have a much deeper history than China in relating to the Middle East. People often forget. If you look at the airport of Bahrain today, who built it? Japanese companies back in the 60s and 70s, right? You look at many of the ports, the roads, they were done by Japanese and Korean companies. So today, people talk about China as mainly because of the perceived choice between China and US for the so-called middle powers or third party, but in reality, that's not so true. We are rather limited in knowledge, in capacity, and that's not to belittle the interest we may have in the region in the future.
Well, I was smiling because I remember the time when Japan was buying up all the famous golf courses and the Empire State Building, and people were saying, "My goodness, we're soon going to become Japanese, native." And here we are. But listen, forgive me for asking, but do the Chinese people understand President Trump's reasons for going to war in Iran?
That's a much more difficult question to answer.
And I'm sorry, even, pardon me for interrupting again, but your views would suffice. The Chinese people, you're a huge country, but what do you think? Do you think you are convinced that the reasons are clear to you?
Not really. I would think partly because of the way the messages are communicated. You have statements that of a more colloquial nature in President Trump's own messaging through social whatnot, and you also have his key secretaries references. For example, there was a reference to the so-called that later we double checked had to do with Chiang Kai-shek. I have to study that with a reference by Secretary of State Mark Rubio. Now there is a greater level of recognition that even in the age of, particularly in the age of AI, we have to be extra careful in taking the translated words at face value. There is so much built into the culture, including religious connotations, and also in the specific references, and the audience is targeted. So I would think it's more responsible for me to say that across the board, we don't quite understand what the American offer of because it's not as well packaged. It's not should we say, what more or less watertight, comprehensive presentation, because you've got so many projections and almost incessant projection, sending out of messages. It's not very easy to keep up.
Well, that's of course very interesting because that's what we hear from the European allies too. But from what we've heard so far, and this is going to be perhaps a 10,000-foot question, a difficult question, but I would like for you to try and give me an answer to the question: that from what you have heard so far, do America and Israel have the same strategic interests in the Middle East?
That depends on what you mean by strategic. Um, the they they may not, and there are lots of textbook explanations, and also some of the media um, commentaries alluding to American and Israeli interests or at least, or a large set of rationale trying to make sense of this time seemingly the joint action in tandem. But it's hard for us to make a an independent assessment. Mind you, it wasn't until late 1990s before Israel and China established diplomatic relationship.
Yes.
They kind of, that opened a channel of communication, but nevertheless, the history is rather short, much shorter than our history of interaction with Iran. Iran and China established diplomatic ties in 1971, the same year Henry Kissinger came to Beijing. I think Saudi Arabia, what didn't Saudi Arabia wait until 1999 to establish, to recognize the People's Republic as the legitimate representative of the whole China? So it's a mixed bag of relationships. We can't just be talking about China and the Middle East or how we assess U.S. and Israel.
Fair enough. The American scientists, and I'm going to use a semi-military phrase here, but American strategists always describe China as America's pacing threat. I suspect China's strategists probably return the favor. From what you've seen, would China's strategists still consider the United States as China's pacing threat based on the performance so far of the American military and technology?
America is a pacing actor regarding China's pursuit of national reunification. That's for sure. It goes way back to the 1950s, or even before the formal split between the Communist Party and Nationalist Party, or before Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek went to Taiwan. And other than that, I don't think there is anything that's really pacing, as we should say, from the United States. And also, to the extent that then you have, let's say, quote unquote, unfriendly behavior, actions in areas of technology or in areas of even minerals or whatever, right? It's a good, it's a good shot in the arm, in the sense that it's a good reminder that we should try harder. So in other words, it's very much like a person growing up, right? It would be, the person would not be strong, have inner strength if he only had a smooth ride. He never encounters any sort of challenges or side winds. So I would not agree at all that the United States is the pacing threat to China. But on the issue of national reunification, again, this goes way back to the 1930s and 40s. America is a pacing actor. That's true. Yeah.
So, since I have the privilege of calling you a friend, I will follow up this question, and I will ask you, I was trying to directly relate America's vaunted leadership in military strategy, technology, and so on, and say When you compare that to American performance, this war was supposed to be over in the week. We're now in the fifth week. Seems to be expanding as opposed to contracting. What lessons does China take away from all this?
Uh, I'm going to be rather undiplomatic in looking at answering your question.
We would not have you on the program if you were always diplomatic.
Yeah, in terms of assessing military power capacity, or for that matter, what's called supremacy or primacy, however you term it, China as a nation state itself, we went through warring states among ourselves. We had the Han dynasties. We had non-Hans who ran China. We also had clashes with India in 1962, and then with Vietnam in 1979, and we went through foreign occupation. But Chairman Mao used to have a good saying when he was leading the Communist Party in a long march. That famous saying is that the end of the day, what determines the outcome of a war, you can win battles, you can lose battles, but what determines the outcome of the war is not the velocity of a bullet, is not the power of a gun. I'm sorry, it's not the power of the hardware. It's the will of the people. Now, of course, he was referring to the support the poor peasant of China was given to the Red Army, but I would think my understanding today is that yes, in terms of air power or even private companies like Starlink,
right,
that can come in to assist such operations in terms of naval power, nuclear submarines, America is unrivaled. But on the other hand, you also, I heard you alluded to earlier on, you had Vietnam, you had Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, and now Iran again. I'm not saying there is a definitive answer to that, but let's not just say, well, the more powerful weapon, the more destructive, the better, because the will of the people, in terms of the people, there are three groups of people. One are those in the societies where party A defines as enemy. There is also the people, domestic, A's home country. And then you have a C group, that are the people of who are not directly related. So that subliminal, among those three groups of people, I think there's a very powerful force at work, right? And somehow they converge to say, well, yes, there are issues, but can we have alternative solutions? Alternative to the use of weaponry.
Well, your answers always remind me of how important it is to have direct communications between our two great countries. And they seem to have slowed down quite a bit, certainly on the government and the military side. So this is a very general question. As you know, I'm going to be spending a couple of weeks in China next month. And one of the organizations that is really helping me or guiding me a little bit is the Friendship Association for International Relations in Beijing. Do you think that private organizations and media, people like myself, can fill in some of the role? You can't do it completely because you need to have more and more government-to-government relations. But do you think that the private sector needs to take a little more priority, give a little more priority to communications?
Well, we have had a policy of re- of requiring visa-free. It's a unilateral offer, but the partner country does not have to change their policy. For example, we just did that with Canada, and then you got Australia. I do hope, I don't know, but I think it would be very meaningful if on the next trip,
Yeah.
Mr. Trump comes to Beijing, that China announces a visa-free policy for the United States. For right now, U.S. passport holders, if they're on transit from China from mainland China, even to Hong Kong or to Vietnam or India or Japan, they can have, I do believe, 3 weeks or 2 weeks of visa-free, or 7 days. I forgot the details. But we should make that step of welcoming Americans to come to China, just as British, Germans, Canadians, Australians, or French. Yes, people-to-people communication is very important, and we have taken a good step. I think it is a step in the right direction, and I do believe there are good reasons for those unilateral visa-free policies to continue into the future, in part because foreign tourists coming to China, they can help with the consumption.
Well, as always happens when we have you on, the time just slips by. And before my producer starts waving a red flag, I'll say one question for the end, which I'd like to ask. What are your worst fears, Dr. Daojiong, about this war in the Middle East?
Nuclear. The worst fear is that somehow we do know Iran and Israel have nuclear facilities. Somehow, whether by design or by default, that these fissile materials get destroyed or get whatever, however it does, it starts to contaminate the air, the water, and start to affect people's health. That's my worst fear, because you will have long-lasting impacts on humans and also on the ecology there. And frankly speaking, the Middle East is not just a place of oil. You got dairy products, you got food contamination that impacts, and you have real people. It's beyond the region. It's chaotic. And second to that, I would rank the worst fear saying, well, this is going to be more than, we're now also 1 full month. Should this be a quarter? Let's hope, certain hope not 1.5 year. Then you have the absolute shortage of oil and gas to the rest of the world, especially here in Asia. And China is not going to be spared, and also for that matter, Japan, right? It's a major economy as well. Japan, in theory, has 200 plus days of storage, but that runs out. So the second fear is for this war to prolong. And related to that, the third one is that somehow in the process, I do understand the beliefs in difference between the Shiites and Sunnis, but in the end, the reconciliation among the Muslim world or the I do fear that somehow this time will end up in a further widening of the rift between these two groups of believers in a religion that does not always have to end up in violence against each other.
Well, Professor Jha, we have done it and run out of time. Thank you so very much for taking the time to help our global audience understand China's foreign interpretation of this hugely dangerous war in the Middle East. I do hope you will come back and see us again. Thank you also to our viewers from around the world. Join us again on Polaris-Live.com as we continue to explore the most consequential relationship of our time, the United States and China, and its impact on the world. We are totally user-supported and would be very grateful for a nominal contribution so we can remain the way we are. Let you hear directly from some of the most seminal geopolitical thinkers that we have today. We hope to see you again. Until then, goodbye.